Many centuries ago, a great thinker once said you judge a community by its humanity. In these days of real estate prices and public school test scores, humanity can easily get lost or even slip away into oblivion. Our guest has been trying to keep that from happening to Boston's South End, where she's been living since the late 1960s. For several years, her efforts have mainly taken the form of columns she's written for the South End News. More recently, the columns have been put together as a book. The title is South End Character, Speaking Out on Neighborhood Change. We'd like to welcome the author, Alison Barnet. Thank you very much for being with us, Alison.
Thank you for inviting me.
And of course, by way of disclosure, I have to admit that we were colleagues back in the early days of Neighborhood Network News.
Yes,
you were a
we
contributor. What made you decide to live in the South End? Because this is the late 1960s. You were still in college.
64, actually.
The mid-1960s, right?
Right.
What
Nothing made me. I didn't know where I was, Chris. I went to BU, and I was a transfer student, so they had no room in the dorms, no room at the inn, and they just gave me a long list of approved housing, because in the 60s women had to live in approved housing. It was the Y, it was, I don't know, all kinds of places, and I think it was the last one, Franklin Square House in the South End. The last one and the cheapest one, so I said I'll go there. But I didn't know where I was going.
Well, the place we identify you with mostly in this book is where you moved a few years later. Right. And this is part of what we now call the old South End. Some people might say this is the South End of transients, but you were a transient who stuck around. Talk about this home and the kind of people and the relationships you had there.
In that house?
Yes.
Well, I fell into that too. I was at the Franklin Square House for 2 years, and in the summer you didn't have to be supervised. So my friend Kathy and I decided we're going to go live in an apartment. And we went to a realtor, and this guy knew the landlady, and he took us over there. So the landlady was in her 80s, late 80s. She'd been a nurse in France in World War I. I was just talking to a friend of mine about he's putting together World War I material, and there were these people. People used to live for a long time in those apartments, and so there were these old, interesting people who'd been there forever.
And the funny thing is that I'm not saying everybody was the best of friends necessarily, but they all had a way of looking out for each other.
Yeah. There was a community in that house. I didn't think of it that way. But we all went down to see the landlady every night, sat around, watched TV with her, maybe even ate with her. And then later in life, I realized that she didn't get out much at all. So our visits to her were a major thing.
Of course, the other thing that's interesting here is why you decided to really sort of lock yourself in, because after she passed away, or at least before she passed away, there was an arrangement going on. This is an unusual, but it's sort of a team ownership here, but
yes.
There was still a commitment on your part to make a go of this.
I loved that house. I didn't want to move, and I knew I'd have to move if the realtors got a hold of it. So by that time, there were two men, unrelated, who had moved in. They were friends of friends or whatever. And one of them stopped me on the stairs one day. He knew that I wanted to buy the place, and I had no money. And so he said his grandfather had died, and he would lend me my share for no interest, I believe. And then the other guy came in too, because it seemed easier.
Because another interesting question is why you found this interesting, and why you're the kind of person who'd write a book about it.
Because I'm weird. I'm exactly the kind of person.
Yeah, but there's a way you go about being weird. I mean, you write things down, you keep a journal.
Right.
You walk a lot, you look around a lot.
Right. And particularly on my block years ago, we were a very tight block. We had block parties. We knew absolutely everybody. We had a little newspaper, the East Springfield Gazette, and I always tell people it was just a little Xerox job. But we brought it house to house, and we knew exactly how many people lived in there. So at one house we might leave 3, at another 4. There was no waste because we knew exactly who lived there.
Of course, the other thing is you have the reaction from the newer people.
Yes.
You know, I might share these feelings sometimes because I'm an older Bostonian, but on the other hand, I'm saying, are the new people really all that bad?
Yes.
You're kidding.
I think, well, I say never the twain shall meet. There is a tremendous gap between the old attitude, I say, and the new attitude. And simply, I guess, it's that the old people care about people, and they didn't care that much about appearances, you know? And the new people care everything about appearances, and maybe not so much about people.
Another issue is crime, for example.
Right.
I mean, you're no stranger to it, but you're never hysterical about it either.
No, well, I don't think any of us used to be, unless something really horrible happened. I mean, a lot happened. I had break-ins. I was mugged on the street a couple of times. But it didn't make me want to move. And I also always say it didn't make me into a racist, which it did with some people. I remember one woman, I hadn't seen her for a while, and I said, "Oh, where have you been?" She said, "Oh, I was mugged, and now I'm afraid of all black people." It's like, what?
Well,
now they're afraid of everything.
I know. I saw the comments about the syringes and the condoms. And I said, "Oh yeah, I remember reading about those in the South End News too."
Right.
You can't write about the South End without writing about dogs, and you write about them. But this is not just what you see at that park where the dogs are frolicking with each other.
Right.
Tell me about like Sammy, for example.
Oh, Sammy. Well, I wrote a thing. I think this is the column that people like the best. I keep hearing about this. Dogs. The new dogs are nothing like the old dogs, because the old dogs were like Sammy, my landlady's collie. Well, first of all, there are no collies anymore of any sort, and he was very fat. And
there's a reason.
Yeah, there was a reason.
She fed him. Of course, he's fat.
She fed him. You know, I think she started feeding him at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and she fed him skirt steak. What are these things anyway? Chicken thighs, mayonnaise.
Don't forget the liverwurst.
Liverwurst, which he only liked it in a tube. He didn't like the round ones, right? I have a cat, and he's not fat, but I feed him. His dinner time is 4:40, and I think that has something to do with her. I mean, it's not 4, it's 4:40, but.
I know. And we always see these stories about attachment between dogs and their companions, their human companions. But
right.
After your landlady passed away, it had been quite a while, actually.
Right.
This dog came back.
He came back. He really did. People don't believe this. I turned that dog into a kennel myself in Brighton. And some woman found him in Blackstone Park, and he still had his tags on and everything, so she brought him back. But that was really, I mean, what happened there? I don't know.
I have to ask you about a lot of the vanished South End that you write about here. And I guess it's one of the important points of the book, because I've heard some of this before or seen some of it before, and yet it seemed to still change my sense of things in this neighborhood, the rhythm of history. Why did you feel it was so important to go back, whether it's businesses or people that you write about in the South End? Some of them, they're obscure, but they're very interesting.
Yeah, well, I think that I and many other of the old people, I don't mean in age, feel like we had something really wonderful years ago, and then it was taken away from us. It's not going to be coming back. I mean, I talk to people. Just yesterday, I talked to this guy. He was born in the South End. He remembers everything. He was telling me all the things that used to be at the corner of Mass and Tremont. He remembers it so well, and he's in his 70s. You know, these were wonderful places to us. They didn't look so good, maybe, but they were wonderful places.
What are your favorite places?
Now?
Yeah, well, I guess some of them are still there. Yeah.
Gee, that's a tough question. I don't know. I used to like the Chico's Variety Store and Kiedis's Luncheonette. They're gone.
Yeah,
it's hard for me. It just happened the other day. I have some friends in Norwell. They used to live on my street, and I suggested getting together. Now we would go somewhere to eat. He said, let's go somewhere near you. And I have to say, Jeff, it's too expensive. Anything near me is too expensive.
It's not the Red Fez back in the old days.
No, no. I mean, really expensive.
Well, you come out with a book, and this is a day when a lot of people are doing things on the internet, even best-selling authors, you know, there are things that are being sold through Amazon.com. You're just selling books, and you're only doing it in the South End, at least so far.
Yeah. I don't know how much interest this would have outside of the South End. I think it should in a lot of ways because the same things are happening elsewhere in Boston.
And in many other cities too, I should admit. But if people do want to track this down, what's the best way for them to come across it?
I guess to contact me by email, and then I'll get in touch with them.
So what should that be? Or
that should be A.A. Barnet, that's AABARNET, 1T, at gmail.com.
Right, well, thank you very much for being with us. And the book is called South End Character, Alison Barnet.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. We'll have more news in just a moment.